All right, I'll give everybody just a few minutes to continue piling in. But it's great to be here, and really thank you for the invite. So let me say, I'm not sure, I don't see General Quast just yet, but say thank you to General Quast and Mr. Aldridge for inviting me to such a great conference. So on the way here, my teammate and I, Sergeant Grabham, we were flying down, and I took a little baby nap, as I always do when I'm traveling, right before I get to come to any conference or any speaking event. And I woke up kind of in a panic. I was sweating a little bit, and I said to her, so Chief Select, and I said to her, Katie, first name is Katie, man, I'm a little bit worried about this speech I have to give to at AFITIC. And she said, well, why are you worried? I said, man, these are cyber professionals, cyber operators. This is a smart crowd. And this is a topic that, like most of us, I'm not really that familiar with, right? So I know how to connect my iPad to my iPhone and now to my Apple Watch, and that's about as much as I really know about cyber. So I'm worried, if I'm going to be able to hang with this crowd. And so Katie looks at me, she says, look, Chief, don't worry, because in life, there's really only two things you have to worry about. Either you're sick or you're healthy. If you're healthy, no need to worry. If you're sick, there's only two things you have to worry about. Either you live or you die. If you live, you don't have anything to worry about. But if you die, there's only two things you need to worry about. Either you go to heaven or you go to hell. If you go to heaven, there's nothing to worry about. But if you go to hell, you'll be so busy shaking hands with other chiefs, you won't have time to worry. So I feel a little bit better about delivering this speech. And it's great to see our new Air University chief. It's great to see our 24th Air Force chief and our Cybercom Command Sergeant Major Readiness. So thank you once again for this invite. This is just a tremendous opportunity. It's great to see so many airmen here, period, but it's great to see so many enlisted airmen, and it's great to know that we have so many of our industry partners here with us today as well. What I thought I would do is just first and foremost make sure that all of you understand that at the highest levels, so between me, General Goldfein, Secretary Wilson, General Wilson, our Vice Chief of Staff, man, we fully understand the importance of cyber when it comes to how we operate, how we ensure global vigilance, global reach, and global power. I'll tell you of the 5 things that the nation really asks us to do on a regular basis and the 5 core missions that we're really good at. None of them, not one of them, I would go so far as to say, not that they won't be as effective, but they won't be possible. So when we talk about air superiority, rapid global mobility, global strike, ISR, and command and control. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, hey, we've been doing that stuff since 1947, really before the advent of cyber, before we had computers or networks or systems or anything. And I would agree with that. We have been doing those things since 1947. But today, I contend that these things would not be possible without the advent of cyber and all the things that each of you do on a regular basis for us. One of the other important things I think you should understand, and this is, I think, where we give a little bit of credit or maybe a lot of credit to our industry partners as well. One of the more important things that we think about and we talk about in the Pentagon are the game-changing technologies. So the things that we're looking at for our Air Force for 2030 and beyond. And I'm talking about things like hypersonics, our ability to get anything, anybody, anywhere on the planet within an hour. Directed energy will allow us to not have to maintain so many stockpiles of weapons all over the globe in the various theaters. We all know about some of the things that we're already doing in unmanned aircraft, but it also, as we continue to evolve with unmanned systems, we can take a lot more risk, especially in contested areas. Autonomous systems, things like artificial intelligence, where we can take these systems and they can not only just perform pre-programmed activities, but they can actually react to the environment, again, particularly in a contested environment, right? right? So these are truly some game-changing technologies, and also nanotechnology, our ability to miniaturize not only weapons, but pieces and parts of various things that make us leaner, lighter, faster, stronger. How would any of it be possible without cyber? I would argue that we wouldn't be able to get to where we need to be without the professionals that sit here in this room and operate across the globe, not only from an Air Force perspective, but all services that propagate cyber for our nation. So all weaved in and through all of our operations, weaved in and through all of the things that we think we'll need for the future fight, all the things that we think we'll need, that, honestly, we know we'll need to tackle the challenges of global security, global instability today, to include the 4+1, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and the violent extremist organizations that we fight really all over the globe. And so technology is great. But let me tell you what provides us, from my perspective, the true asymmetric, the true competitive advantage. What do you think it is? Our airmen. No doubt. Our airmen. And so, from my perspective, in order for us to be effective, we have to do a couple of things. I think you have a responsibility, I have a responsibility. But in general, I think we have to make sure that our airmen, each of you, the airmen that you supervise, your teammates, number one, stay resilient, that they become and continue to be well-led and well-trained. Right? So let's talk about this resilience thing for a second. This weekend, I received an email saying that we had what are we at now, Katie? 65, 66 suicides, total force suicides for this year. Last year we had about 100. The year before that we had about 100. So we're on pace to have a few more than 100 this year. This, along with some other things that happen across our Air Force, are indications to me that we're not doing so well in this area of resilience. I used to think about resilience in terms of, hey, how do we help our airmen bounce back from whatever things that they may go through? Now I tend to think of it more in terms of, hey, how do we help them move through? Because I think when you go through a traumatic event, whether it's PTS in the AOR, losing a parent, losing a child, going through some type of sexual assault, or whatever traumatic event that we all go through, sometimes it's divorce, sometimes it's financial or disciplinary problems, you never quite bounce back and become the same person. So I'm really interested in how all of us help our airmen move through these difficult times. And given what we just talked about, it's challenging now to be an airman, whether you're in cyber or any other one of our AFSCs. It'll even be more challenging in the future, given what we all believe we have the potential to engage in as an Air Force, as a Department of Defense. And so I need your help in making sure that our airmen, your airmen, can always maintain that level of resiliency that they need to be effective. I need your help in ensuring that they're well-led. And so in some instances, that speaks to you and the things that you do and the environment and the culture that you create in your organizations. And in some instances, it speaks to your ability to develop them into tomorrow's leaders. And as equally important is, man, you have to make sure they're well-trained. When it's time for them, when we need them to do what they're called upon as a nation, they have to be ready, right? So those are the things that's kind of most important to me: resilience, leadership, and training. Here's where I think you can best help us ensure that we maintain this strategic, this asymmetric, this competitive advantage that we always talk about, that our airmen provide us. Unleash them. Unleash them. Allow them to do the things that they're best at. Allow them to be innovative. Allow them to be creative. All the reasons that we went out and went to the science fairs or wherever we find cyber airmen, right? So I know all cyber airmen don't hang out at science fairs, but wherever we went to find you, man, unleash them. Allow them to be innovative and creative. And I know sometimes that's counter to our military structure, but this is the 21st century. And this is a different fight. I'm not asking you to lower your standards. I'm not asking you to let them come to work in tennis shoes and, face tattoos. But if we're going to be successful in the future, we have to unleash them. We have to allow them to be the airmen that they are. The creative thinking, the innovation. They can help us solve, and I say they, I'm actually talking about many of you in the room. I've seen some young airmen here. You all can help us solve a lot of the challenges that we have. So that's what I would ask each of you to do is, again, unleash them, allow them to do the work that they've been trained to do. I want to read you a quote from, that's never good, right? And this is from our former president, John F. Kennedy. Our national security in a period of rapid change will depend on constant reappraisal, on alertness to new developments, on imagination and resourcefulness, and new ideas. To me, that's another way of saying our national security will depend on the ability of our airmen to do the things that we've trained to do. So what I ask you is, lead them well. Again, I'm pretty excited to be here. I'm excited. I understand you have some questions for me. I'm excited where our Air Force and where our nation is going with respect to cyber offense, cyber defense. So I'm going to turn it over to you and ask for any questions that you might have for me. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the conference goes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking questions at this time via email at afitc2017@gmail.com. Captain Granger, please go ahead and ask the first question.
No questions so far, sir.
All right, I know this is cyber, but let's go old school. Somebody stand up and ask some questions. Is that allowed, sir?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Chief, the floor is yours.
Blend the old with the new.
Do we have any questions in the audience? Why don't you come on up and you can speak right here.
Okay, so while he's on his way up, let me just tell you about, as we talked about your role and my role, one of the things that I've been pretty adamant about since I've been in the seat, as I relate this back to the importance of them being trained and ready to take care of the things they need to take care of. One of the things I've been adamant about is continuing to take away the small things, in some cases the large things, that have been thorns in your sides, that have not allowed your airmen to focus solely on what we train them to do. So, hence some of the advancements in our EPME. We're getting ready to have some advances, some changes in our enlisted evaluation system. We'll continue to hack away at additional duties, continue to reduce AFIs, some huge changes coming with respect to CBTs. I'm not sure how you guys feel about that as cyber folks. But again, the goal is to I'd like our airmen to be able to focus on a couple of things. One, the mission at hand. Two, the airmen and teammates around them. And three, their families or whatever else is important to them. And so we'll continue, me and General Goldfein and the Secretary, we'll continue to hit singles and pull those things away from your airmen so they can truly focus. Fraser, come on, man.
Chief, Sergeant Fraser, 1 CMXS Ramstein.
All right.
So, we've heard rumors, but I've never seen you say it. Airman First Class EPRs, are they staying or going? I'm out.
All right, so hey, that falls right into the category of what I was just talking about. It's not that we don't think Airman First Class, and what he's really referring to is the very first EPR that we all got, at least those of us who are active duty, at our 20-month mark in the service. So by no way are we indicating that airmen are not as important and don't deserve to have their performance documented at that 20-month point in their career. But the reality is we document performance for a reason so that we can make future management decisions. And with those particular EPRs, we never use them again. So you guys spend a lot of time and energy writing them. These chiefs up here spend a lot of time and energy marking them up with red ink and telling you not to use a ... use a semicolon and a double dash and blah, 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 blah. And then they go into the abyss or into the cloud or Prada or wherever they go, and nobody ever pulls them out again, really until you get ready to retire and somebody looks at that first EPRs and says, you know, hey, somebody said A1C couldn't balance a checkbook, or, you know, whatever funny stories we tell at retirement ceremony. So what we kind of came to the conclusion was if we don't use them, why spend the time to write them? Now, what I do believe is that we have to shore up our feedback processes to make sure that these airmen receive the right amount and the most effective feedback during that point in their careers, which is an entirely separate component of our enlisted evaluation system. So to answer your question is, we're still doing just a little bit more research, trying to ensure that we have all of the data to make sure we understand all of the second and third order consequences. There's probably a small percentage of airmen that would potentially go about 46 to 47 months without a report, which, you know, we can live with that. I think in the Army you probably don't get your first OER, your first evaluation until you're in E5, right? So we won't go that far just yet, but I think this is a good program. I think it'll save you and particularly our staff sergeants a ton of time. This will be a tremendous time saver and more efficient thing in the training environment. So more to come, almost there. Great question, Frazier.
Captain Granger, do we have anything in the book?
We do.
Okay, go ahead.
Will we see any major changes in the next year or two about the assignment process to help foster better talent management?
Man, we're trying. So I really like our team. Hey, sir, how you doing? It's good to see you. I really like our team that we have at AFPC now. So we put a lot of pressure on Major General Kelly and Chief Lindsay to really, and I hate to say change the culture, right, because our culture is what it is, but to really change how we think about talent management, particularly for our enlisted airmen. And I think, you know, we're making some positive changes. And this is not an easy task, right? So any assignment, any HR type or talent management, human capital management system is kind of made up a little bit of art and a little bit of science, right? If you have too much science, you get what we have, right? Name, time on station, who's the most eligible, you go, with very little regard whether you have the skills or the talent or whatever it is. And we're getting a little bit better as we continue to implement our enlisted developmental teams. If you have too much art, then you get the good old boy system that, you know, like we had sometime in the past, where folks get assignments based on who you know and who likes you and whatnot. So neither one end of the spectrum is great. We just have to find the right balance between, okay, with as many enlisted airmen as we have, we can't massage every enlisted assignment. But there are some that really need to be massaged. And again, I believe in full transparency. And these assignments, many of our assignments should be driven by who's the most talented, who has the skill set that we need to perform these duties, not who's the most eligible, who's on their second or third tour coming out of Korea and ends up being the most eligible, getting all the great assignments. I had 2 assignments to Korea. I got Kadena and Elmendorf both times, so I benefited from the system.
Do we have any further questions in the booth?
We have a couple. I'm going to save one for last, though. So this next one, as the demand for cyber experts continues to grow, will the USAF look at warrant officers as a possibility for addressing this issue?
That's actually a really good question. I'll tell you what our stance as an Air Force, I'll just be fully honest with you, right? What our stance in the Air Force has been up to this point. We don't have them for a reason. We don't need them, right? And when anybody would ask this question, we would say things like this. When I say we, why am I saying we? Me, right? So I'm the Air Force or whatever you want to call it. I would say, oh man, it's going to cost us too much. These positions have to come from somewhere, so you either have to convert all of these second lieutenant, first lieutenant positions, or all of the senior and chief positions. It's going to be disruptive because now you got to put in this new pay system and this new performance management system. We don't even really do good with the 2 that we have now, or the 3 that we have now, with civilian, officer, and enlisted. This is just going to be too hard. Bye, right? That's probably what you heard as I was speaking about this answer. And every time I would walk off some stage, some commander's call, some luncheon, I would think to myself, you know, that's an answer, but it's not a really good answer. And I think what we owe to you is a really good answer. So I've asked our friends in SAF MR office to, hey, why don't we just do some in-depth, some really invasive research and help us understand whether we need this or not, so we can put it to bed, or if we think we need it, let's do it. So me personally, I'm agnostic to it. If I find, and General Goldfein and I have talked about this several times, and I think we stand kind of in the same place. If we find that having warrant officers in the Air Force makes us a more lethal fighting force, it makes us more efficient in how we go to war and present forces, then by all means, let's do it. If we find that it doesn't, then the juice is probably not worth the squeeze, as some people say. But the first thing that we need is really some in-depth research. I can certainly see in cyber our folks that are now enlisted pilots and even some of the other aviators that we have in the United States Air Force. I can see it in ISR. I can see it in contracting. I mean, there's various AFSCs where I think, hey, on the surface it sounds like it might work. Now, whether everybody likes it and how disruptive it is, and from my perspective, that's really no reason not to do something that ultimately will make us more effective. So again, we'll try to conclude or have SAF MR get us that research by the end of this year. As you can imagine, this is not something that can happen, or a decision that can happen overnight with what it might take to implement it into our force. And we'll also be leaning on some of our sister service partners who certainly have these. And I see the Command Sergeant Major is like, don't do it, man. So yeah, I say all that to say we'll see. I think it's possible. I'm not sure how likely it is, but what we owe you is a good answer to why we need it or why we don't.
Next question from booth, please.
Chief, as you intimate, we must allow our airmen to innovate, but in a compliance-based, tech order-centric environment, there is often an insufficient degree of latitude to genuinely unleash them. How would we bridge this gap and truly permit the innovation that we need, and what tools do our senior and junior NCOs have to permit the scale of innovation that you're driving for?
Did somebody actually ask these questions? I'm just saying, because they're actually really, really good questions. So here's where I think we're going with our chief of staff and certainly our new secretary and myself. We fully understand that we have a compliance-based system, that we have tons and tons and tons of AFIs, most that have not been updated in the last 15 years. I think we have 1,306 AFIs that kind of govern what we do on a regular basis. Now, it'd be nice if we said, hey man, let's just throw all this stuff out the window and unleash everybody and boom, let's go after it, right? Obviously, we know we can't do that. But here's what General Goldfein and the Secretary has done in the meantime. They've said, hey, where you see you can be more efficient, more effective, where you see that things are in your way that are compliance driven, if you think you can be better and more efficient without it, stop doing it, right? Now, what does that translate to, right? So if you ask me when I was in A1C, that means I take off all my stuff and like, I'm out. Right? Chief said we don't have to do it, I'm not doing it. But what that really translates to your wing commanders is, okay, let's be smart about the things that we think we no longer need, whether it's training, whether it's CBTs, whether it's keeping this particular gate open or servicing this particular group of individuals. Let's be smart about it. Let's make sure that the wing commander, who in most cases is the one buying the most risk, understands that, okay, we're no longer going to provide this service. Here's what it means. He's given wing commanders that latitude. Now, some have jumped all over it and said, yep, we're going to stop doing this. We're going to be smart about it. We'll document properly. Some have been a little bit timid, to be honest. Some of your wing commanders have said, yeah, I hear you, but I don't know if I believe you. Another piece of this is, and what I had a talk with General Goldfein about was, hey, I think it's great that you've given commanders that latitude, but I don't know that anybody has talked to the IG yet about that, right? So I think it's, man, General Goldfein said we're going to stop doing it, so we stopped. Now the IG rolls in and says, you stop doing what? So he had a conversation with General Rock, the IG. I had a conversation with Chief Jones, our CEM for Air Force IG, and we talked about, hey, we can't allow commanders to truly have this freedom if you're going to roll in off the top rope with compliance type issues. So I think we have that resolved. So until we can get to a point where organizationally and from a policy standpoint, we can have the flexibility we need. That's what I think all commanders should be inclined to do, is to take those things that they see as barriers, those things that they think will inhibit their ability to do their jobs, and stop doing them or do them smartly.
Cam Grantor, next question, please.
What were you saving for last? The OCP discussion, was that the last question that?
Oh, no, sir, but that one is in there.
Okay.
Would you like to speak to that topic? What role do you see the Air Force civilians playing in developing the future airmen and building their resiliency?
Yeah, so I think civilians play a huge role in developing our airmen and contributing to how resilient these airmen may be, right? So many times, and all of us know this, right? Probably the greatest thing that our civilians bring to our Air Force is stability, consistency and stability, right? So many of us, we're in, we're out, we're into positions, we PCS on a regular basis, but our civilian population brings that stability and consistency. And so when it comes to a training standpoint, the amount of knowledge and expertise that they possess that they can pass along to our airmen is just really invaluable. When it comes to resiliency, hey, they're teammates just like all the rest of us. They're responsible for creating a climate and a culture just like all the rest of us. And so that's where I would ask our civilian teammates is to chip in, just like I ask all the rest of us to chip in, and make sure that, hey, every single day I'm watching out to my left and to my right for the airmen and the challenges that they all face, particularly since a great majority of our civilian population may be retired, may have served, may have seen some of these things, may have deployed, may have been through some of the personal challenges. They can be a tremendous resource. Now, I understand that's a challenge, right? Because once you retire, you're like, hey, man, I'm just here to do my thing, and that's why we have all these master sergeants and whatnot hanging out. But I think if we can all, regardless of active duty, guard, reserve, civilian, contractor, if you're a part of any organization, man, you should try your hardest to be a good teammate. Because I think when it comes to resiliency, that's what I believe is missing. So we have all these programs in place. So we're doing, I'm not sure if anybody came from AFSOC, but we have the POTIF program in AFSOC. Our ACC brethren have the Airmen Resilience Teams in the DGSs. We're doing some tests at about 4 bases around. We call it POTIF Light, Task Force True North. All of this stuff is really about embedding helping resources, chaplains and mental health professionals and medics and chaplains assistants, embedding them into our squadrons, which again, I think is great. But what I really think will help is if I'm going through something that when I walk into my office, into my work center every day, I feel pretty confident that I don't have to go through it alone, that my teammates, active duty, civilian, are there for me. And so, again, I think our civilian partners, our civilian airmen, can help with resiliency in that perspective.
Next question, please.
Chief, will the Air Force change to OCPs over ABUs for all?
Maybe. So we had our 100th Air Force Uniform Board. Why is that funny? You're trying to do the math, right? We only been a separate service for 70 years, but we had 100 uniform boards, right? Yep, me too. I thought that same thing. Where the vote was, the recommendation to the Chief of Staff was to transition from our ABUs to OCPs. It's been a pretty popular decision. I think most of the force, there's probably a third of the United States Air Force that already have OCPs based on some deployment or working in, one of our CRW, CRGs, or working in we have anybody from the northern tier bases. I know our defenders up in the northern tier bases are already in OCPs. Honestly, I believe, and I've had an opportunity to wear a couple of 2-3 different versions of it. It's a better uniform. It's a better fitting uniform. It's a more functional uniform. It allows us to bring unit patches back and the pride that goes along with having unit patches. It allows us to get rid of morale shirts. Yeah, yeah, yeah! Now, but it does and it will come at a cost, right? We have close to $20 million or so tied up in bench stock of ABU stuff. And so even if I told you, hey, we're going to move to OCPs and the transition date, and you have the next 2 or 3 years to transition, how many of you would go out and buy another set of ABUs or green boots? Yeah, nobody. So a couple of different challenges, a little bit more research to be done. And so I hate, this is probably the 4th time I'm saying, yeah, maybe, I don't know. But maybe. So we want to make sure, obviously this is a huge decision for our Air Force, so we'll go through and we have our A1 folks who kind of manage our uniform stuff for us, along with DLA and some of our other industry partners, doing a little bit of research to make sure this is the right move for our Air Force. I'll be honest with you, some people have said, hey man, we're not in the Army, don't try to make us look like the Army. Some people have concerns if you're walking around the Pentagon or base wherever in OCPs, can you tell, okay, no, is that an airman, is that a soldier? Oh yeah, it's an airman. When you see the fire burnt orange, I think the color is, fire burnt, what color is that? Anybody ever wore the OCP? Anyway, we might do it. So we'll see.
Next question, please.
Speaking of cyber warriors, with all of the competition for competent cyber personnel from organizations like Amazon, Google, etc., how do we keep the valuable resource of knowledgeable airmen?
Right, so there's probably a little bit of divide about this, but I'll speak in general, and I think this certainly applies to our cyber airmen about how we keep people in the Air Force. Most people, the first thing they would point to is, hey, an SRB, we have to pay them more money to compete with the money that they can potentially make at Amazon or Google or where have you. I tend to believe, because as I look at the statistics and the surveys as people decide, especially our young professionals in the prime of their careers, why they decide to separate from the Air Force, and I know that people don't always say, hey, I went to get the money, but very few people actually decide to separate just because of money. Just like very few people actually join the Air Force because they think they're going to make a lot of money. The things that drive people away, and conversely, the things that allow people to stay is, first and foremost, man, when they get to do their job. I think if these cyber professionals have the freedom and the innovation and the creativity and the time to do what you train them to do, they're generally happy. I think the second thing that allows us to keep them, that will allow us to keep them in the United States Air Force is, I'll go back to something I mentioned earlier, is being able to come to work and be in an environment where they feel valued. That I'm a part of a team, that my commander and my chief and my first sergeant and my teammates actually care about me, and this stuff is fun. That's what I think. Those are the biggest things we can do. Now, we can certainly ensure that money is available for SRBs and that type of compensation. But I think, again, at the end of the day, they'll always turn to, hey, man, do I enjoy what I'm doing? Do I have the time to do it? Do I enjoy the people that I'm around? That takes a little bit from me, and I think a lot from all of you who sit in these workspaces and belong to the organizations where these young airmen reside. And at the end of the day, I think we all have to come to terms with the fact that some people have opportunities, and if they choose to take advantage of those tremendous opportunities, man, good on them, right? That just makes us, means we have to do our jobs, be that much more effective at doing our jobs when it comes to both recruiting and retaining our cyber airmen.
Next question, please.
Has there been any talk to extend our high-year tenure for staff and tech sergeants to allow them to be experts and technicians and not be separated prior to the full 20-year career?
Has there been any talk? Do you mean, have I been talking about it? Okay, so let me answer that question in a kind of a roundabout. Let me answer it directly first. No. But let me just kind of tell you how I think about this topic and where I think we need to go as an Air Force. So right now, if you're an airman in the United States Air Force, when you become a staff sergeant, tech sergeant, and master sergeant, the expectation is that you'll some point transition from being a technician and a specialist to being a leader and taking on these leadership roles and all this other stuff. So when you guys teach at the senior NCO enhancement seminars and all that type of stuff, you focus on, hey, importance of leadership and taking care of your airmen and right? And in the back of your mind, you think to yourself, but yeah, some of you have never been good at it and you never will be good at it. But if you want to be a master sergeant, you got to do it, right? I'm guilty of this as well. But I think in the future, what we have to figure out is how do we allow a staff sergeant, a tech sergeant, a master sergeant, a senior master sergeant, a chief master sergeant to continue being a specialist, a technical specialist, and still have opportunities to progress in our Air Force. So this leads us kind of right back to the warrant officer discussion. It also leads us to a discussion about a system very similar to our Marine Corps brethren. Again, I wouldn't be opposed to either. I think it's faulty for us to just assume that every enlisted airman in the Air Force is going to be great at leadership. This is how we set them and their airmen up for failure, really. Right? So we try to take every airman and we put them in this box over here that says, do your PME, be a great leader, take care of your airmen, don't worry about this, you're no longer a technical specialist, now you're a leader. It's all in, how we had the old NCO creeds and all that type of stuff is, right? And oh yeah, if you want to be over here, you just want to be a specialist, great, until you run out of time as a staff sergeant or tech sergeant. I just don't think that's necessarily the right answer in today's Air Force, where we really should be taking advantage of those individuals who want to continue to serve as technical specialists, who can stay on the line and be great mentors and train, or who want to stay on the line and just, hey man, fix aircraft. I think we take advantage of that type of system in our ARC component, right? So many people get to serve for extended periods of time and really never have to consider or take on those leadership roles. So no real talk about extending higher tenure, but that may be a possibility.
We have time for one more question.
Is this the last question?
Last question.
All right, Chief. A1C Christopher Matthews would like to know if his unit can take a selfie with you before you go.
Where is Christopher Matthews? Way up there? All right, bring you and your unit, come on down, man, so we can get this picture. Hey, so again, let me say thank you for the invite. This has been a tremendous honor for me. I look forward to working with you. Where's Chip? Is Chip here, Chief Campbell? He's not? Okay. So I've had the pleasure over the last 6 months during my time in the seat to work really, really closely with Chip. I really love some of the things that you guys are doing as a community with the Agile Airmen, and I think if you haven't talked about it, you'll talk about it sometime this week. Some of the advances that you're making with education, with industry, sending out some of your cyber professionals to do fellowships with some of our industry partners. So a lot of great things. I really look forward to benchmarking some of the great things that you're doing in cyber and spilling over to some of our other career fields. If there's one thing I would want you to walk away from here understanding is that I have your back, right? So I'm fully vested in making sure that exactly what I said earlier, that your airmen have the time and the space to do what you train them to do. So I'll continue to take things off the plate. I'll continue to make sure that they can focus on training, they can focus on taking care of each other and their airmen, and that they have time to rest, recover, and take care of their families. I think that's extremely important. That's exactly what we need for all of our airmen to be most effective in the future. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Chief Master Sergeant Wright.
I'm going to help you marshal a little bit.
All right. I think I can take the photo. Yeah.
Where's Matthews and his team? Okay.
When he goes off, I'll give it to him.
Yeah. Like coming on.
Where's my photo op? There's my photo op person. Okay, yeah, let's let them do that.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in your seats at 14:45. Our next keynote speaker will be Dr. Matthew Wood from Amazon.